All right, how about that panel? So we need more diversity in tech, right? Looks like Martha Edith is going to have to take a waiting list because she's definitely asking for some help. So whatever you guys can do to promote her program as well as the others, it would be greatly appreciated because we certainly need it. That's one of the premises of this whole summit is to really highlight the Latinos in technology, what they're doing, who they are, where they are. So we've seen, quite the diversity within our own community as well. And let's make sure that we continue to drive that message forward and inspire and encourage others. So we're coming up to our keynote here right before lunch. And so I have the pleasure of introducing someone that I met along my startup journey, Mitch Kapor of Kapor Capital. He's here with us today, and I'm excited to hear his talk and hear what he's working on, what their team is working on. Very strong drivers in the community and very strong promoters of diversity, and that's what they live by. So without further ado, let me introduce Mitch Kapor of Kapor Capital.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here today. So you see me up here, but actually I am just the surface representation of a much larger team that works very hard on trying to make a difference in opening up this whole Silicon Valley ecosystem, both through our investments and through the programs we do. And so there's a number of people from the Kapor Center staff here today. And if you just put your hands up so you could be recognized in the back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 back there. They really do a tremendous amount of work. I get some of the glory of being up front. And is Frida here yet? I don't think Frida stepped into the room yet, so I will save her introduction for later, but my better half, professional and personal partner. So I want to talk about access. Access is incredibly important because you can be the most talented, brilliant person in the world, whether entrepreneur or scientist or artist, but if you do not have access to the right connections in the world so that you can do your work, you will not be recognized. You'll be isolated in a hermit, and maybe 50 years after you die, something will be discovered, and then you'll become famous, and it will be too late. Now, access really, really matters, and in particular, accessing the innovation economy, this world of tech startups that is creating so much change and so much economic value. That's the subject that I want to talk about today. I think it's germane. Okay, we'll go to this mic. Why does access matter? Well, there's a bunch of different reasons why it matters, and I want to talk about why in particular it matters to me and to the folks at the Kapor Center and Kapor Capital. When the ecosystem of Silicon Valley is opened so that there's really a level playing field, and that means that currently underrepresented entrepreneurs have just as much opportunity as everybody else, it is going to open the floodgates for solutions to some of society's biggest challenges. And that rests on two important points. One is there is an enormous untapped talent pool of people who are ready to make a difference if they have the access and the preparation and the opportunity. And that's a circumstance that we need to change. And a thing that we know about entrepreneurs in particular is that their lived experience really matters when it comes to the kinds of businesses that they start. The saying is, entrepreneurs scratch their own itch. And if your lived experience is different, then the problems that you have seen in your life, in your world, in your community are going to be the ones that will give rise to the ideas about how to fix them and how to make them better. And when we have a more inclusive set of entrepreneurs with a wider range of lived experiences, the set of challenges that are the set of problem/opportunities is going to be much larger and much more representative. And that's very important because we need lots of smart people working on all of the challenges faced by all people. And your lived experience really matters. But I'm going to try to get very practical here about what access means, what are the barriers to it, and how do we take some of them down. Let's go to that. So what kinds of access? What kinds of access really matter? Well, there's different kinds. Access to knowledge. If you don't know what to do or how to do it, you may have good ideas, but you're not going to be in a good position. Access to capital really matters because startups take money. I actually don't think money is the most important thing, but money is like essential amino acids. You have to have enough of it and the right kind at the right time, or you're not going to, your venture is going to thrive. You need access to networks because nobody builds companies on their own. You need to be able to connect with others, to hire them, to get advice, to contract for services, and that matters. And in particular, in Silicon Valley and the world of startups, access to introductions really matters a lot because that is just the way it works, the way the game is played. Getting a key introduction to somebody who can mentor you, give you feedback, fund your company, partner with you, that really, really, really matters. So I want to give a couple of examples actually in 1 minute. First, sorry, I forgot this. There are some barriers to access. I'll go through this very quickly because I think you know this, but it is worth stating for the record because not everybody knows it. Where and if you went to college still matters way too much to people with decision-making power. It shouldn't. The fact that you went to Stanford or MIT is arguably a good thing, but it is absolutely overweighted, and if you went to some other school, not so good. There are actual biases in the world. Some of them are subtle, some of them are not so subtle, but the actual fact of the matter is that speaking with an accent is still seen by a number of gatekeepers as a kind of a deficit. And where you work or worked really matters a lot. It can mark you as a likely winner or loser, depending on whether you've been working for a big winning fast growth company or a company that's seen as past its prime. And finally, your home networks, your family, your school, your neighborhood, where you came from, are really everybody's primary means of access. And if you've come from a privileged zip code and you've grown up all your life with other people who are venture capitalists and executives and so on, you're just naturally going to be leveraging those contacts in ways that if you haven't, you're not, and that's a barrier. But these things are not just theoretical, they're very practical. And I want to show you 2 slides, which this is the first. So hang on a sec on this one and say first, thank you to my partner, Frida Kapor Klein, for focusing in on the pragmatics of the kinds of subtle cues and the etiquette and the unwritten rules that you need to know about to succeed. So, and Frida is just come into the room and is here. So thank you, Frida, my better half in all respects. This is a fictitious email, but it is one that I have seen variations of hundreds of times. It sounds like it's something that comes in via FedEx. It's written to John Doerr, the venture capitalist at Kleiner Perkins. Read so much about you, admire you. My dream to have you invest in my business is growing rapidly. 10 million in revenue within 5 years. As soon as you sign the enclosed NDA, I'm happy to arrange a meeting with you. Are you free next week? It's what's wrong with this picture? A lot. A few things. We just circled some of them. So first, via FedEx. No, nothing gets sent via FedEx. It's all done via email. We're in a digital age. A $10 million business in 5 years, that might sound pretty good and will be seriously uninteresting to a major league venture capitalist who is looking for things that at a minimum are going to be $50 to $100 million deals. Sign the enclosed non-disclosure agreement, and I can't tell you, I still get 3 or 4 of these a week that come in my inbox. No, venture capitalists do not sign non-disclosure agreements, and you can actually read a great deal on the web if you Google this subject on why they don't. Oh, and I'm happy to arrange a meeting with you. Are you free next week? That's kind of taking things a little bit too fast because we don't know enough about whether it's actually going to be worthwhile to spend this hour. We need something that comes before that. So even if something like this comes in and it is well-meaning and well thought through, I would say this has multiple fatal diseases to it in terms of how you approach. And the question is, how do you learn the subtle cues, the etiquette, and the unwritten rules that really matter? Here's an example of much more the way you want to do it. We'll go through it, and before I click the next slide and bring up the red circle part, see if you can identify some of the key things in it. So this is what's known as a warm intro. It's not from the entrepreneur himself or herself. It is from a well-regarded angel investor that the entrepreneur has previously gotten to and established a relationship with. And that angel is writing to the big-time VC. It's making a warm intro, delighted to introduce you to a very talented entrepreneur from a non-traditional background. Solves a big problem, represents a huge opportunity for a successful disruptive innovation. They've developed an MVP, minimum viable product, on their way to significant traction and revenue. We've invested and will participate in the Series A. I've attached their deck and executive summary. Would you like an intro? I predict you won't be disappointed. This is what you want to go for. Oops, sorry. Whoa. Excuse me. Fat fingers. Learning the kinds of key ways to tell your story, to express what you've done, to find the right allies, to leverage those allies, and to communicate in ways that will maximize your chance of moving through the system. That is a huge part of the agenda. And what you need is access to the information and experience that will enable you to do that. Because it is, as Frida says, the subtle cues and the etiquette and the unwritten rules that really matter the most. And that's why, as wonderful as it is to be able to just go and read everything on the web and about how to do a startup and lean startup and so on, and all of that has value, there is this subtle agenda that really, really matters. And it's learning those codes and learning to code switch into them that are very important and getting the help that you need to do that. That is really effectively going to increase access. I want to talk a little bit about very briefly, some of the things that we do at Kapor Center to help unblock access at these different levels, because it is clear we also need system and structure change in both the short term and the long term. And we have to start not with folks your age, but we have to start with kids in school and ensure that everybody who wants to develop, for instance, in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and math, has the opportunity to do that and to give kids a shot at going to Stanford and MIT and Cal and other places who have every ability to be there and succeed, but who aren't on a track to do that. That's what SMASH Academy does, Summer Math and Science Honors Academy, which Frida founded and has been running for now 10 years as a project of Level Playing Field Institute. And College Bound Brotherhood, another program out of the Kapor Center, which Justin Davis, who is here, is the person who runs it. Justin, put your hand up. Trying simply to increase the number of African American males in the Bay Area who are graduating from high school college ready, met their A through G requirements. That group is actually the lowest performing group of all the different underrepresented demographic segments, at least that I'm aware of, in terms of college readiness. So that's a particular area of focus. Unblocking access to information. So we did this report, and it's not just, I was going to say paper, because it's not paper at all. It's not just bits. This Coding Nation report was the first compilation that we know of all of the programs that exist that teach people how to code outside of computer science degree programs, both at the school level and at the professional level, online, offline, boot camps that help people get their first job, and all of the other categories, some 300 plus programs. It's available for download from the site. There are tremendous resources that are out there for people to learn how to code and to become more technically proficient, and in particular for entrepreneurs who come from the business side, becoming more technically fluent, even if you're not going to be writing code for a living, and many or perhaps most of you won't be, the technical comfort level that can come from this kind of learning is very, very important. Access to networks. It's why we support things like the LSA Innovator Summit here and Focus 100 and Women 2.0. These types of events that bring people together for real knowledge sharing, including of the sort of the tacit, subtle kind, and that where people can meet and form relationships that are then going to be springboards later on. Extremely important, and it's the reason we're big supporters. And access to opportunities. So we've done a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning. Level Playing Field Institute, which is our affiliate organization to the Kapor Center, has just sponsored a couple of hackathons for students. This is middle school, high school, all underrepresented students of color. One down the peninsula at the Computer History Museum, one in Jack London Square in Oakland. Over 250 kids combined at the two for a full weekend, formed into teams, working on designing and creating mobile apps that address a problem or issue in their community. Lots of mentors. One of the Kapor Capital portfolio companies, Twilio, sent 17 people to it. Super intensive. And the level of energy and commitment on the part of the students was amazing. We had some that came on Sunday morning at 7 a.m., even though doors didn't open until 9, because they wanted a couple extra hours to work on their project, get it done. There was a competition, there were cash prizes, students got low-cost tablets for participating. But to see a couple hundred black and brown high school students, and these are not people who had not done, they're not tech geeks prior to this, so engaged, you could see it as a life-changing experience of beginning to put people on a different path in life. photo on the left is of the Kapor Center Impact Fellows. So during the summers, we bring undergraduates and some graduate students with computer science backgrounds and some MBAs to work in our portfolio companies to give them a first, and at Kapor Capital, a first exposure to Silicon Valley. They're coming from, I would say, they're not coming from the usual set of schools that populate summer internships. We're focusing very heavily on, forgive the acronyms, HBCUs, Historically Black Colleges and Universities, and LSIs, Latino serving institutions. And it's really amazing because it can move people into that Silicon Valley track to have a successful summer experience. Opportunities matter. So what does it look like when access is unblocked? Okay, here's a picture from the hackathon I was just telling you about. This is the Code and Hood team that won first prize in Oakland. They were pretty happy about it. They were doing some amazing things. Some of our portfolio companies, some of you may be familiar with these. These are companies we've invested in Kapor Capital. Regali, which is disrupting the international remittances market with a low-cost, easy-to-use, mobile-based solution for sending money overseas. Idrisio is an amazing entrepreneur who is the founder of this. Plaza Familia, founded by Ana Roca Castro, which is doing a bilingual online curriculum for classrooms for English language learners. That is pedagogically wonderful and culturally appropriate, and is really addressing the fact that the online resources for English language learners have frankly just been terrible. And that this is a terrific solution that is now rolled out this fall into the first 300 schools, and will move from the hundreds to the thousands, we think, to the tens of thousands of classrooms, and really make a difference. And one other company, Pigeonly, Bridging the Divided, very astute entrepreneur who has understood that when people are incarcerated, and remember, we have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world, the only link that people have to their families and friends, only real link, is by phone, because they're in distant institutions and visiting is difficult. And if you want to keep people integrated in society and have a chance of them coming back, keep them connected. But the whole, forgive me, racket by which phone calls have been managed in prisons it's expensive and inefficient, and Pigeonly is a disruptor of this. If you know what Google Voice does by giving you a very inexpensive local phone number to call, this is a similar approach, but for that particular market as an entry point into a whole set of services, not only for the incarcerated, but when they are released, of reintegration back into society, of employment, credit, and other things. So keep your eye on Pigeonly. All three of these companies were founded by very hardcore entrepreneurs who are interested and committed to building big businesses in ways in which their own lived experience and the problems that they have experienced and have seen generated the seed of the idea for a way to create economic value and social value. So these are in our impact bullseye. And my passion and why I'm still working with entrepreneurs and investing and really why everyone at the Kapor Center is doing this is there are so many more opportunities there is so much more that you can do in creating your businesses, in taking your life experience and thinking about what problems are really worth solving, in going through all of the challenges that you will have to go through in order to decode some of these secret codes in order to be fully credible as an entrepreneur, to get the access that you need. It's all worth it, and it is worth it for us to continue to support you in doing that. So thank you very much, and I'll pause, and we've left time for Q&A. Try to be directly responsive. Dr. Klein. Oh, thank you. I was gonna save this for the very end, but thank you. I told you I get a lot of support from this, for doing this, and that, Frida, you weren't in the room, but I explained that I was the face of this, but I introduced the staff. We are doing a couple of events of interest, I think, to invite you to. January 28th in Oakland at the Kaiser Event Center, a screening of the film Documented, and a conversation with Jose Antonio Vargas, who's an immigration activist, Pulitzer Prize winner. The issues that he's talking about, sorry about that, did that again, are highly relevant, I would imagine, to you directly and to people that you know, and you might want to join us for that. And then March 6th in Austin, Texas, a pre-conference gathering at South by Southwest of Latinos and Latinas, thank you, Latinos and Latinas in tech. So if you're familiar with South by, you know a couple of things. One is that it has grown to become just about the largest gathering for all things interactive and all things digital, both tech and entertainment and music and film. And you'll also know that it has not done a terrific job, to put it mildly, in inclusiveness with the Latino-Latina community. This pre-conference gathering, which we're helping organize, is designed to begin to address that, and it is going to be a terrific event, and you can check the URL. So, yes, please note these. And with that, I think I have some time for Q&A. Anything is fair game. Do we have a mic down there? Or if people can stand up and just speak up, I'll repeat the question to make sure everybody can hear it. And I see a hand. Ma'am? Yes?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosie the Closer, CEO of Compelling Conversations, and I teach exactly some of the things that you're talking about, which is how to sell yourself, how to be effective at public speaking, and how to have a presence and be magnetic. My question is the following. So I think we're in a place in history where we have probably the most number of professional Latinos in terms of, making six figures. Of course, it's severely disproportionate. And we have some that have reached high-level amounts of wealth, right? I would say there's a number of them. There's a number of them that are CEOs of companies. So my question to you is, according to your research and your experience, why do you think there's not a collectiveness in terms of putting those resources together and in terms of promoting Latino entrepreneurship and in terms of promoting solving some of these problems?
Are you asking why those who have already been successful haven't done more to bring up and help people who are aspiring? Yes. Were you asking that about women or Latinos, Latinas in general? Yes. I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. I do know that it is sometimes the case when people have been the only and that has been their experience their entire life. There's a kind of under-theme of, I did what I had to do, and that's what you have to do too. It's sort of, sometimes it's the tough love approach. I think that sometimes it's too late for particular individuals. If they're already wedded to that point of view, they're probably not going to change. But among the aspiring entrepreneurs, and some of you could be fabulously successful, now is the time to really bake in the idea that what we're really after is the success of all of us. And the way to achieve that is to pull other people up with you. And I think that here is something where we can borrow from Silicon Valley a little bit. It's sort of the positive side of the old boys club. It is just expected that people will mentor, and that if you're being successful as an entrepreneur, even if you're not done, even if you're in the middle of it, what you have learned in your first year, if you've raised money, that is valuable to your near peers who are going through that now. And so building into this emerging ecosystem a kind of, we're all in this together, give something back, I think long-term is the way to address that problem. And there's, I'm sure, more to be said from people who are better situated than me, but those are my thoughts. Yes?
Hello, everyone. Alejandro Caminos, representing Latinos in Finance. And just to respond to the question directly, we're coming from the other spectrum of this whole movement. We basically represent Latinos that work in the finance field, both at VC firms and the usual big banks. And we finally have come together to really start looking at some of these type of issues where we can start to really network collectively with other Latino organizations in the Bay Area specifically, as well as abroad. And I think what's happening, in my perspective, is that we're just starting right now to kind of wake up to this notion that something needs to be done. And it's not just about bringing any kind of finance or funding, but it's about targeting Latino people with money. And so that's really what we're trying to do right now. And we're getting some good momentum. And we're also working collectively with a lot of schools in trying to encourage Latinos to increase the enrollment in these different types of finance schools. So I think that what you're seeing is it's actually happening now. And it might be delayed reaction for some people, but at least the group that we're with, we're practically looking at that.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Oscar Menjivar. I'm from Urban Teens Exploring Technology. We teach young men of color in South LA and in WAS to become technology entrepreneurs. And I love what you're saying in terms of real access. I've been at two different situations where people have asked their kids to, just volunteer, pass bags out at tech conferences. And to me, that's not real access. Real access a lot of times means finding internships where kids can really shadow somebody that is in the tech world. But my question to you is how do you advise us to encourage and help those that already have the access, but are not Latinos or Blacks, to be able to remove some of the fears that they might have to come and invest in communities like ours and be able to say there are opportunities there and we're missing out on those opportunities? What would be the best way to help them to see the opportunities that those communities have?
So, one thought. In business, you have to make a business case regardless of the moral calculus of the situation. And that can sometimes be difficult and confusing because privately, maybe you're saying or I'm saying, this is such a no-brainer. Like, why aren't you helping? Like, you made it, and these are your people, and, you know, and emotionally and morally, of course. But in the business world, it plays by the rules of business. And that means you also have to be very hardcore when you talk about the opportunities that they make business sense in terms of the size, the accessibility, that it's really doable. So for instance, talking about Pigeonly, we, in our first meeting, part of what won us over was the economics of the argument about how much gets spent on prison phone calls, what the average cost is, what the, you know, how disruptive you could be if you used a different technology, so that the thing stood on its own in terms of economics. It was a total package of social impact and economic impact. If you're dealing with successful business people, you need to understand, and people who might invest, you know, what their needs and requirements are, what kind of returns they're looking for. You need to be able to frame the thing in a way that is going to make sense in multiple dimensions. And the more that you can do that, the more chance you have of attracting investment and affiliation. The mistake that I see some people make sometimes is when there is a kind of social mission element to whatever the initiative is, to lighten up on the rigor and discipline on the business side. And I think that just doesn't work. I don't think this is a complete answer by any means to your question, but hopefully it's a useful insight. And if anybody else, I want to crowdsource this, and any of my colleagues have a better answer than me, which you often do, this would be the time. Frida or our friend Ben Jealous, who is here as our guest today, recently stepped down as the executive director of the NAACP, and a formidable force for progressive change is here. Don't feel compelled, but put your hand up if you want to say anything. No pressure. My lifeline here. All right, I'll get you on the next question. Lisa Mitchell from the Kauffman Foundation.
So you recently hosted the hackathon event in Oakland, which I was following on Twitter, tweeting it, but I noticed that no real major media picked it up, and I'm wondering why.
It's a great observation. We certainly thought it was enormously media worthy. I would say two things. So first, it wasn't an obvious story for, at least the way we pitched it, for the media outlets. But second, I think we reached the conclusion we need to fundamentally improve how we tell our story around events like that. So in the self-criticism level, you might think, oh, you know, we're big, successful, been around, whatever. I think we've concluded this is an area where we need to reboot on how we communicate and how we position what we're doing, so that when this is for the media, when it comes time, we do get the coverage. And yeah, I would say you never get to be so successful that sometimes you don't have to take a step back and go, hey, we are just not getting this right. We are losing here. We need to be winning. What do we need to do? Can we be intellectually honest with ourselves? Can we get resources? And in fact, since we've done that, very productive conversations, the test of which will be in 3 months or 6 months, is it different or better? And it's the same thing with what you do, you launch something, you've got a website, you want to get, for instance, you want to get people to sign up to get some customers, in the top of the funnel, and you do your big launch and nobody shows up. Okay, that's a learning opportunity. So we're on our learning curve around how this thing that is so dramatic, the energy and the engagement of the students, how do we tell the story? What do we need to do? And we will get there. We will get there on this.
Thanks, Mitch. Pablo Fuentes, founder of...
Pablo?
Yes, sir.
I want to get your question, but would you now, I see Dr. Klein has her hand up.
Absolutely.
This is a good chance for her, and then I'll come right back to you.
You got it.
We've invested in him. He has to do this. That's the secret code.
I want to make a quick comment, and I think it's also to the last couple of questions, to Lisa's question and to your question, because I think you were also asking, how do you get mainstream business people, was part of your question. I think there's an awful lot all of us can do, and we certainly at the Kapor Center and at Level Playing Field can do a better job. But I think it would be wrong to not say that bias and racism play a role here. And I can't help but notice that there was a media frenzy around Mark Zuckerberg's hackathon that involved 20 dreamers. I don't want to take anything away from giving an opportunity to dreamers. We served 250 low-income kids of color, half girls, half boys, more than half Latino, and got zero coverage. That was about Mark. That wasn't about what he's doing. That we have to work on changing that as well. And I think that's what we hear from mainstream VCs when we introduce, and I'll turn it back to Pablo, when we introduce Pablo, or when we introduce Ana Roca Castro, or when we introduce Edricio, the businesses you've seen, it's like, well, we don't really do X, and they've got it in a little box. If you ask a mainstream VC why they don't have more women entrepreneurs, an answer you hear most of the time is, well, we don't really invest in fashion, and that's what women entrepreneurs do. So there's an unbelievable amount of bias and racism and stereotyping and prejudice, and that's part of what we work on too.
It's a tough act to follow. Now, I just wanted to ask you, tell us a little bit more about the impact that your recent move to Oakland has had. You used to be, right up the street here, and you have moved to Oakland, where I presume you have a lot more, you have a physical presence in a city where a lot of folks from the communities, Hispanic and African American communities are. How has that been? Has that made a difference? Is that something you're happy? Are you going to be doing more of that and having more kind of boots on the ground in those kind of places?
We made a very conscious decision a while back to move from San Francisco to Oakland. All of the organizations, as well as we moved, Frida and I moved our residents, we believe in investing in Oakland and contributing to its ongoing revitalization. So there are tremendous opportunities there. It's an under leveraged area. I mean, there's, even very practical, there's a lot of much less expensive, wonderful startup office space there. There are much less expensive, especially given what's going on in San Francisco, places to live. And we like being on the edge of things. We saw lots of good things beginning to happen in Oakland, in the community, with the art scene and the restaurants and the beginnings of tech presence. And there is a kind of resilience in that community, and is obviously much more diverse in multiple respects than Silicon Valley. So it felt like the right place to be to contribute to that and to be part of it. And we're thrilled to be there. We're redoing a building that will become, I hope, a a nexus for activities in the community. And there is a burgeoning tech scene in Oakland. And our hope is that the kind of social impact themes that I've talked about that are so important to us, they're a much more natural and better fit with Oakland than other parts of the Bay Area in terms of startups. And so that's where we decided to, put our chips down and place our bets. And yeah, we're thrilled to be there. And I see over to take two more.
This is going to be our last question.
Take
'cause
one
I think,
more.
I think people are hungry, so.
Maybe two. All right. Hi, I'm Brian Clark. I'm CEO of a company called Anotree. But I part-time teach at a lead instructor at a program called Mission Bit, and it's providing after-school coding classes to high school students around San Francisco. And we're currently in the process of we're a nonprofit, and we're trying to raise money to support our next set of classes. And I wonder if you had advice for nonprofits on how to raise money for those type of classes.
Advice for nonprofits on how to raise money for those types of classes.
I am brand new into this, so.
So I would say a couple of things. First, it's a great question, and when you have a great question, the next thing to do is to figure out who is the great person to ask that question to. I'm not kidding, who has the expertise around nonprofit fundraising? That's not my special expertise. Yeah, I know lunch is close by. You've stood up in public and asked the question, so if you will see, Nicole, where are you? If you will see Nicole afterwards, who's a managing director of the Kapor Center, will at least identify a resource or two so you can ask your question and get a good answer, okay? Let's do that. And with that, I think I will again thank you very much. Have a great conference. Stick with it.